Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Lounging with Leesh. I am so excited today because not only did this project actually continue on beyond day 1, but today's topic is my all-time favorite band. I wonder who that could be. Yep, that's right. Today is Hanson. Now, before you turn it off, I think that we need to remember the purpose of this podcast video series, and that is to kind of like share some upbeat, joyful things. And before you turn it off just because you don't want to hear a ramble about Hanson, what I want to remind everyone is that these are people or ideas or things that have inspired me, that interest me, that are super cool. And so I'm going to go over what I'm going to call my TED Talk about Hanson and why they are so unique, how they are still around, how they've managed to make music for over 20 years, and how they're just badass in general, and how that can apply to basically anybody's life. I think they have a lot of qualities that I admire that you could transfer to any industry. But before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by my cute mug that is in the shape of a cat. And so if you're watching this on the video, you will see, but if you're listening on the podcast, basically I have a cup that is the shape of a cat and has ears and everything. And the story behind this cup, I will digress just for a little bit, is really funny because I used to work at a marketing agency and was an account manager and we were responsible for entering the tasks in for the team to complete the client work. And every once in a while I thought it would be funny to like insert little tasks that should just make the people working on the stuff laugh, because it's, you know, can be very dry. And so one time I put in for our graphic designer, Melissa, thank you very much, a random task that I was like, oh, when she sees this, she's just gonna laugh because she really likes cats. So I was like, bring Alicia a cat-shaped mug full of candy or something like that. Like something that like I thought was pretty impossible, that she would just see, she would laugh when it came up on her to-do list and then delete it, right? No. Melissa decided she would just keep moving the due date. She's like, okay, at some point I'll get to this. And it was this running joke that like at some point she's actually going to do this. And I thought, I highly doubt there's a cat-shaped mug out there in the world. Well, not only did she find it, but she got a really cute one, and there's a paw print inside. And I just was like, leave it to you, the cutest human on the planet, to actually not only deliver on a made-up task, but to do a really good job at it. So thank you, Melissa. Cat-shaped mugs, everyone. So, okay, let's get started on the actual topic. So, first and foremost, if you can't see me either, I'm wearing my very first Hanson t-shirt, which I'm pretty sure was, I think you had to buy it from a magazine at the time. This is pre-internet. Let's just take everyone back to, like, I want to say I was probably 7, if that. They were making music pretty much from the time I was 5 years old. And they were not too much older. The youngest is my brother's age, so what is that, 35, 36. And so this shirt, although it's not the cutest, because can you imagine I'm like a 7-year-old kid, 5-year-old kid with a big giant brown t-shirt that, yes, still fits me, because back then everything was giant and apparently we bought things to swim in. But I still love this shirt because not only is it super retro now, which felt like it was retro even then, it is autographed by the guys on the back. And so this represents one of their first albums, Middle of Nowhere, and you know, you could see on the back, like they're kids, they're basically kids. And so the time frame was a unique one because the internet was not a thing yet, and to be able to get their music, it was either MTV, you know, they played a video and my dad would yell and I'd run downstairs and I'd watch the video, or like a book. You know, if I want to learn more about them, I bought like a book called Zack Attack, right? C was my favorite one, or the magazines, like the Teen Beat magazines and whatnot. Or, obviously, to get the music, you had to actually go to a record store and buy an album. And I remember my first time buying an actual album was a cassette tape. Yes, actually, probably still, I have it, and I should have got it out. And it was basically like monumental moment. I remember my mom took me to Tower Records down here in Sacramento, and we were walking around. I knew I wanted it, and then I got my hands on it. It's like, I probably listened to that thing probably till you could break it in my little walkie, what is it called? Walkman. And then eventually, I think after that, it was pretty close to CDs coming out. So, but once you had to have a Discman to listen to that. So, anyways, so that's the kind of time frame that they started making music, and they blew up right around that time. But the thing is, part of the reason why I love them so much is, first of all, they had like a very unique sound. So, three brothers with very kind of like high-pitched a cappella-y type songs where they would just harmonize, and they didn't always have music behind them or instruments behind them, which was really unique. And then another thing is that they had long hair. I mean, that was pretty rare at the time to have three dudes with long hair. Like this was the time where it was like, people thought, oh geez, what, they look like girls. Like, there was a lot of judgment, and I still think that they've come a long way with that, but these were like little kids basically. And so from the beginning, they basically just didn't give a rip, is what I'm basically trying to tell you. And so that was really intriguing to me, and obviously their music was really great. So that's the part that like we come to now, where what I learned about them later, once they blew up with Mbop, which is a great song, but I actually kind of get annoyed by, because that's the only song that anyone ever knows, but that's fine. But so once they got signed to the big record label, I guess the story goes, and I could be getting this wrong, mind you, I am not the biggest fanson, if you will, in comparison to other fansons. So I've met many, and they are way more knowledgeable than me, so just put that caveat. But they're still my favorite band. So anyways, once they got signed, like giant record labels did in the early 90s, they wanted to control everything you did and make a lot of money. And they basically were dictating how they wanted their music to sound and what they wanted them to write about. And the story goes, as far as I know, it got to the point where they weren't into that anymore, and it was changing them too much, and they weren't enjoying it anymore. And I think their parents had good heads on their shoulders, and they were able to leave the label and decided to start their own. And so I'll pause here, because I think the crazy thing is if you could imagine being a musician in that time frame, finally blowing up, finally being really popular. They're playing like big shows, and then being like, actually, we don't want this. Like, that would be really hard to walk away from, probably for anybody. And I know other artists have done it over time, but they were like, this is not what we envisioned, this is not what we wanted. And so that piece of like the life puzzle that like I've been thinking about, and like a lot of my friends are thinking about, is like, as we go through our careers and start marching along that path of doing the day-to-day grind, it's like, at what point do you stop in and say, is this what I want? When do we check in with ourselves? And what do we do about it if we decide that it isn't? Or do we just decide that this is the life that we're doomed to live forever? Or not doomed, but bound to, or whatever. So that's pretty badass. And so not only did they make their own record label, but they've created this entire world for themselves. And what I mean by that is they continued making music. The joke is that the band is over 21, so the band is allowed to drink now because it's such an old band. And even though Zach doesn't even drink, and they have a beer label. But anyways, they've built this kind of like band. I would also kind of call it like a community. It's definitely a community where the true fans are very much connected to the band. So they have a members only club that you can pay dues to join, and you get exclusive content, you get an album every year, you get perks, you get this access to this community where you can talk to all your other friends. They have games in there, and they have special shows, and they also do what they call Hanson Day every year, which is now an entire weekend. This year got canceled because of Corona, but it's an entire weekend where they basically put on a free event for all of their fans who are willing to fly to Tulsa, and yes, I've gone, and just kind of share the band with all of their fans and give back to the community that's given to them. And so they've been able to like go across the country, across the world, and set up concerts, do shows that they love for fans that really love them, playing music that they really want to play. And they have giant tour buses, and they bring their whole family with them. They just really created this life that they really love. And not only do they enjoy what they do, but they get to do it in the way they want to do it, which is the thing that's really stuck out to me. Is like, as much as I love their music, it's more about the fact that they've managed to continue down this path of creating and building with this spirit and this energy that keeps them going. So in Tulsa, they have their own recording studio right on the main drag. They've thrown a beer festival. They have their own store. They create art. They have a beer line, hops. You know, it just goes on. And the cool thing is that they just found their niche, if you will. And this is not a marketing podcast, but if you think about it, they really honed in on what it is that they want to be and who that person is that they're trying to reach. And the Hansons are just, they're ride or die. I mean, so when I went to Hanson Day, probably like 6 years ago now or so, I flew out by myself. It was kind of a spiritual journey. And I stayed in an Airbnb, and I was in line to check in, and immediately I met people in line, and they took me into their friend group, and I hung out with them all weekend, literally. And they were just so nice to me and so welcoming, and they knew so much, and here's where you go to do this, and here's where you go to do that, and here's our phone numbers. And they would literally stand out for hours to try to get the best spot for different shows and that, and they would like, oh, we'll save you a spot, like so welcoming. And we got to meet the band, we got to go bowling with the band. They put on a free concert every single day, and each guy chose something that they really liked, so, and did like a special event with just each guy instead of the whole band and everything. And so Zach, and this is my homage to Zach really quick, who is my personal favorite, he's the drummer, he's the youngest, and excuse me, he, in my opinion, is the most musically talented, the best looking, and all of the above. But he did his section where it was just for him was basically recording a song live on stage, okay? Which is insane and amazing. And so he broke it down for us, and he had his keyboard up there, he had a drum kit, and he sang, and he laid down the tracks with his recording equipment, and basically created something off the top of his head that he started working on maybe the day before about video games. It was because he also loves video games. And it was silly but also really good and really incredible to watch. And then they took that song and they put it on the EP for the members only. And so it's just like this incredible community, this way that they have really honed in on each of their loves. Like Isaac and Taylor really love coffee and beer, and so they've created their own line for beer, and they do coffee tasting, all this stuff. And so for Taylor's, this is a side note, when I was there, Tulsa is in Oklahoma, which is tornado country, and sure enough, there was a tornado warning right outside of Tulsa when I was there. And so we were at dinner, and there was, this huge storm, basically like I never been in tornado country before. And the restaurant's like, okay, we're gonna ask that everyone goes in the bathroom because the tornado is getting kind of close. And I'm looking around like, this freaking normal? Like, kind of panicking, but also like trying not to panic because no one was really panicking, because I guess in the bathroom is where like the pipes are for the sewage. So if the building were to rip off, the idea is that you can hold on to the pipes that are into the ground and you don't get flung into the sky with the rest of everything. So I'm like, cool, yeah, let's go in the bathroom. But I have my wine because you can't leave that at the table. But anyway, so the storm is, like, the rain is crazy, and that night we were supposed to go to the dance party with Taylor. His event is that I don't know if it's this way every year, but he is the DJ for a dance party. And so once the tornado kind of passes, but it's still pouring, we run down to the next place. It was a couple blocks away, get completely drenched, and get to the dance party where, if you can imagine, there's mostly women at these events. And so it's kind of like a high school dance where it's all girls dancing and like a few guy wallflowers, but still really fun. And Taylor was ripping it. Like, people were buying him shots. Like, he was going for it. It was wonderful. And he kept playing, what's that one song, like, Another One Bites the Dust. He kept playing that song, and it was really fun. And I barely slept that night because I was so scared that the tornado was going to rip this tin little roof of my Airbnb off, but I digress. So anyways, I could go on and on, but basically the moral of the story here is that these guys were themselves from the beginning, and when they got off track, even though it was popular and even though people liked it and they were making lots of money, they were like, time out. Like, how are we going to stick to what we want and what we know and who we are? And they didn't live this life of touring major arenas after that. They went to do small shows like House and Blues and stuff, but they did it in the way that worked for them. And I'm sure there's struggles. I'm sure they could probably tell you that, like, maybe there's things they would have changed and decisions they would have made differently. But from my point of view, they managed to live a life that provides money for their family, lets them express themselves in a community that's super supportive. And to me, that's super inspiring. So that's Hanson. I'll probably do another episode about Hanson just because they're freaking awesome. But I didn't want to talk about my favorite things and not do them straight at the top. So I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you really enjoy some sort of coffee, wine, whatever you might be drinking whenever you're listening to this, and have a great day. Think creatively, think outside the box, and let me know. Let me know what you think. Comment wherever your little fingertips are. Let me know what you think, and I would love to hear from you. Alrighty, cheers. Have a great day.